the yogic practices in general and Hatha Yoga in particular are not ends in themselves. They are means to the end of attaining steadiness. First, one must be able to sit properly, and then the mind and attention will become steady enough for practicing yoga. Gradually, one must control the circulation of vital air, and with such control, he will be able to withdraw the senses from sense objects. In the previous verse, it is stated that one must observe celibacy. The most important aspect of sense control is controlling sex life. That is called brahmacharya. By practicing the different sitting postures and controlling the vital air, one can control and restrain the senses from unrestricted sense enjoyment. So this part of the Bhagavatam, we are reading Kapila's instructions to Mother Devavati on the subject of yoga practice. So, Kapila Deva has been describing the different aspects of yoga practice, and in this particular verse, he is telling about the yogi, how he has to practice maunam, silence, sadasana jayaha, and he should perfect his sitting postures. And why should he do that? In order to develop sthairya or steadiness. And by developing steadiness in his sitting postures, he must shanaihi, gradually achieve pranajaya, must be able to control his breathing of the vital air, prana, and that will enable him to pratyaharas indriyana vishaya pratyahara. That will enable him to withdraw the senses from the sense objects. Manasahudi, and in this way his mind becomes steady and concentrates on his heart. This is the verse that Kapila has described today. And Srila Prabhupada has made this important statement in the purport. The yogic practices in general and Hatha Yoga in particular are not ends in themselves. They are means to the end of attaining steadiness. Recently there was an article in Time magazine. It was called The New Science of Exercise. There is a lot of awareness in the world about health, wellness, and people's life has become they're all sitting in offices for long hours and these kind of things, and because of that there are so many different kinds of diseases coming. And so there's a lot of awareness that people should do exercises every day. And in that article, there are different types of exercises, about 6 or 8 different types of exercises that are described. Very Western, modern, and all of that, something that came from science. And they also have the description of, there's one other from China called Tai Chi. And it's also very popular in the West, all over the world. And you'll see in the morning in the parks, Americans, all of them doing all of those Tai Chi moves, and that's supposed to help. That's another kind of exercise. And in that group of those 8 different kinds of exercises, yoga is listed. Just see how yoga has come to be known as one of the exercises, kinds of exercises that's available to a modern man and to improve his health, and that's very good. And so we have yoga studios and yoga clubs and yoga teaching all over the world, and it has become a popular word. So, but Prabhupada is saying here these yogic practices are not just meant for some kind of an exercise. It is for bringing about some steadiness in sitting postures. It's not intended that one improves his health so that he can enjoy his life very nicely. That's not the intent at all. It is meant for something much more. They are not end in themselves. Recently I came across another gentleman and he was saying that he is from so-and-so Samaj and so-and-so organization, and that how his wife, his father, mother, grandfather, all of them follow that. And one of the things they follow in that Samaj is exercises. And then he very enthusiastically pulled out his mobile and he showed me, you see, my grandfather, he's 90 years old. Past 60 years or something, he's practicing this. And he showed me a small video of his grandfather, 90-year-old, in some very complex yogic posture, all his body, head, leg all entangled. And he said, just see, he can sit like this for 3 hours. And then the video is there. And you can't see his head, it's just like, all entangled up like that. And then gradually the video, and then slowly his hand comes out, and the leg comes out, head comes out. So like that, you see his very supple body, moving. It's very impressive in a sense that at 90 years he's able to do all those kind of exercises and stay like that for 3 hours. But then what is all that intended to? That people miss out. They think that it is some kind of a exercise, and people say that he never falls ill, he never goes to a doctor, and all of those kind of things, which is good in a sense, no doubt, but that's not the end in themselves. These are yogic postures, yoga, signs of yoga, Patanjali Yoga describes all of that, but it is meant for something higher. And in this particular verse, Maunam Sadasana Jaya Sthiryam, it is meant to bring about steadiness in the sitting postures, which will further Prana Jaya Shanaihi, and which will further help him to control the breath. That's another very popular thing, becoming popular in the world today, and controlling the breath. That also, people generally think it is all meant to help improve your health condition, brings down your blood pressure and so many things. Yes, it will. It may have all of those, but it is intended for something much more, a spiritual objective, a transcendental objective. Pratyaharas chendriyanam vishayan, to withdraw the senses which are so running after sense objects, to control them and bring them, withdraw them, and to concentrate on the heart and all of these things. So here, importantly, Prabhupada has pointed out, Kapila Muni has pointed out, Maunam Sadasana Jaya Sthiryam. It is meant for bringing about steadiness of mind, steadiness of the body, which is intended to bring steadiness of the mind and attention, and will become, first one must be able to sit properly, and then the mind and attention will become steady enough for practicing yoga, for practicing more yoga. So this is how it is always presented. So now, just like in yoga, they try to attain steadiness by all of these exercises, and steadiness of the mind, controlling the senses, withdraw the senses, control the mind, to attain steadiness of the mind, because they have to concentrate dhyana on dharana, and then dhyana on and samadhi on Vishnu in the heart. So there is a similar stage in Krishna consciousness also. When one becomes steady and that is called Nishtha. Nishtha Bhakta. Nishtha Bhakta means one is never swayed. When one has become a Nishtha Bhakta, no situation, no argument, no attraction in the material world can induce the person to stray away from principles of Krishna consciousness. Then he's become a Nishtha Bhakta. There was always this, during Srila Prabhupada's time, there was one of his disciples' daughter, Saraswati. She was born in ISKCON, and so Prabhupada had, at that time ISKCON was very small, and there was a lot of interaction with that little girl. And as she grew up, somewhere in 1972, Saraswati's father and mother had come to Vrindavan. They were doing important service, and so the small girl was also around in Vrindavan. So then this small girl, she was only must be 4 years, 5 years at that time. And a lot of interactions, and she received a lot of mercy from Prabhupada. So once somebody came and told this little girl, why are you chanting? This is all not good. And when Saraswati heard that, she slapped him. One boy came and told, some Indian boy came and told, why are you chanting? This is all not good. And she slapped him. And then this matter was brought to Prabhupada. Prabhupada heard and he was very impressed. And in one class, Prabhupada mentioned, see, this is Nishtha. She has become very fixed up. No one can tell her, stop chanting, she will not stop. This is Nishtha. Nishtha means nothing can induce a person from giving up Krishna consciousness. So like that, Srila Prabhupada gave that kind of an example. So Nishtha is an important stage in the development of bhakti. That's how Rupa Goswami describes also, Adhav Shraddha Tatha Sadhu Sangha Atha Bhajana Kriya Atha Anartha Nivrutti Syat Tatho Nishtha. So Nishtha is one of the stages of the development of bhakti as enumerated by Rupa Goswami based on various Vedic literatures. Now in the Bhagavatam, this stage Nishtha is described as Naishtiki Bhakti. It comes from the same word Nishtha. And there is a verse, particularly a very popular verse among devotees. Nashtha prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatir uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Naishtiki bhakti bhavati. One comes to that stage of Naishtiki bhakti. Now, in this verse, how in Krishna consciousness we come to Nishtha Bhakta stage. Just like the yogis, they do come to Sthiryam by doing Asana Jayaha, Sadasana Jayaha, Prana Jayaha. By doing all of those things, they come to Sthiryam. So how do devotees come to Sthiryam in Krishna consciousness? How one becomes Nishtha? That is described in this verse. Nashtha prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati. Here, it's an important verse, and it says, by doing nityam bhagavata sevaya, regular, daily service to Bhagavata. Here it just says Bhagavata sevaya. And Prabhupada explains that there are two kinds of Bhagavata. The book Bhagavata and the person Bhagavata. The person Bhagavata who is a pure devotee. So one can come to the stage of Nishtha Bhakti when one renders regular service to Bhagavata, and that is hearing Bhagavatam and serving a pure devotee Bhagavatam. This is an important fact of spiritual life. Now, why does Prabhupada say Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya? There are two types of Bhagavata, book Bhagavata and then the person Bhagavata. How does all this come about? Actually, it is described in the two preceding verses in the Bhagavatam. That's how this understanding that Prabhupada explains comes about. Bhagavata Sevaya, book Bhagavata and person Bhagavata. There are 2 verses before that. Shushrusho Shraddhadhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. This verse very clearly describes Shushrusho Shraddhadhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra. Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. Mahat Sevaya refers to serving Mahat. Mahat means Mahatmas, great devotees. And Punyatirtha Nishevanat. Punyatirtha also means those who are themselves completely purified devotees, pure devotees. So, by serving pure devotees, Vasudeva Katharuchi Syat. One develops ruchi, taste for hearing Vasudeva Katha. Tatho Nishtha, Tatho Ruchihi. Rupa Goswami explains, after you come to Nishtha stage, the result of coming to Nishtha stage is you will develop ruchi, taste. And that is again coming from these verses from the Bhagavatam. Shushrusho Shraddhadhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi Syan Mahat Sevaya. So this Mahat Sevaya, pure serving a pure devotee who is Punyatirtha, he is himself an abode, he is a pilgrimage, a place of pilgrimage himself, because he is so pure, he is such a pure devotee. In other words, this is a very, very foundational factor for spiritual development in Krishna consciousness. This and the next verse. And the next verse is Shrunvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridayantostohya Abhadrani Vidhunoti Suhrut Satam. If we hear Shrunvatam Swakatha Krishna, Krishna Katha, if we hear Shrunvatam Punya Shravana Kirtanaha, which is virtuous in chanting and hearing in themselves, then Hridayantasta abhadrani vidhunoti. Abhadrani vidhunoti. Anartha nivritti syat. All the abhadras, unwanted things which are accumulated in the heart, and that Prabhupada says, the desire to enjoy in this material world. So that's the unwanted thing that's accumulated in our heart, and abhadra, nashta, vidhunoti suhrutsatham. Vidhunoti, destroys. So these two, after saying that when you serve a pure devotee, you will develop Vasudeva Katharuchi. When you hear about the descriptions of Krishna's activities, all the dirty things in the heart are cleansed. After saying this, Nashta Prayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Seva. These 2 kinds of Bhagavata. Krishna Katha is a Bhagavata, and a person who is fully fixed in Krishna consciousness, Punya Tirtha Nishevana, he is also a Bhagavata. By rendering regular service to them, one becomes a Nishtha Bhakta. So this is how in Krishna consciousness we become Nishtha. And these 2 principles, serving a pure devotee and hearing from the Bhagavatam on a regular basis, this is an unassailable, indisputable, undebatable fact of spiritual life. In Kali Yuga, so many disadvantages are there. Sattva guna is very less, is depleting, and constantly we are surrounded by asat sangha. But in spite of all of that, a very steady spiritual progress can be achieved by 2 very, very powerful processes. In fact, we can say 3. This is explained in the first chapter of the Bhagavatam also. 3 things. When the sages are asking the 6 questions in Naimisharanya, they bring up in the middle of the questions 3 things. One is chanting the holy name. 2 is serving a pure devotee. Number 3, hearing Krishna Katha. So, because of these 3 practices, in Kali Yuga, although there are many disadvantages, we can make rapid progress. And we see how, keeping all of these things in mind, Srila Prabhupada designed a certain lifestyle for all of us, which fully incorporates these principles. We chant the holy name every day. Prabhupada wrote the Bhagavatam, and it's become an important practice for all of us to read Bhagavatam, hear Bhagavatam every day. It's such a strong thing, isn't it? If you are not in the morning, if you are not in the Bhagavatam class, if you are not chanting, we feel very, very incomplete. That's how it should be. That's the value we should develop. We should not do anything else in the early morning hours. Chanting, hearing, these are the important things that we should be doing, because it will very quickly bring us to the Naishtika stage, Nishtha Bhakta stage. And this and the third important principle is serving a pure devotee, and Prabhupada's personal presence and Prabhupada's wishes, Prabhupada's mission is enshrined in this institution that Srila Prabhupada created. So, all of these 3 important processes, chanting Krishna's name, hearing Krishna Katha, and serving a pure devotee, has been fully enshrined in the institution of which we are all part of. Just look at the good fortune we all have. We should always remember this and never get swayed and forget these things. So, this is called Nishtha Bhakti, Naishtika Bhakti, Nishtha Bhakti, and Prabhupada has taught these things. There's another interesting verse, because you see, Nishtha means being very fixed. Now, the opposite of not being fixed means to fall away into sense gratification, right? And our falling away happens in 3 levels. One is by words, and one is by thoughts, and one is by sense engagement, by actions. So, these are the 3 ways by which we will slip and fall into Maya, which a Nishtha Bhakta, a Naishtiki Bhakti will never happen. So, there is another very nice instruction in the Bhagavatam, which is something that we can always remember and which will help us. This is Lord Brahma's statement to Narada. He says, what he has done, what he has learned, to always remain fixed up. And his words never will never fail him. His mind will never fail him, and his senses will never fail him, because I do this, he says. So, which is like a Nishtha state. That is, na bharati menga mrushopalakshate, na vai kvachin me manaso mrushagatihi, na me hrishikani patantya satpade. He's saying, na bharati menga mrushopalakshate. Mrusha means false or untrue, or engaging in something that is false in this material world. Na bharati menga mrushopalakshate. My words never fail me, Anga. He's telling this to Narada. My dear Narada, my words never fail me. Navai manaso mrushagatihi. And my mind also, mrushagatihi, never strays into a path of mrusha, untruth. Name hrishikani patanti asatpathe. Hrishikani, my senses, asatpathe. Name hrishikani asatpathe. My senses never fail. Because ye hruda utkantyavata drutho harihi. Utkantavatha dhruto hari. Hruda utkantavatha dhruto hari. Because
I'm constantly, with great eagerness, with great zeal, I'm praying and holding on to Krishna in my heart. Hruda utkantavate druto harihi. Hari drutaha. Hrudi utkantavatha druta harihi. Means with great zeal. Prabhupada translates that. So it's not some kind of, okay, if Krishna is in the heart, it's okay. If he's not all there also, it's okay, my life is very happy and I'm going. No. Constantly having that anxiety with utkanta, connected to the word Vaikunta. Kanta means full of anxiety. With great eagerness, with great anxiety, wanting to keep Krishna in the heart. Because I'm doing that, my words never fail me, my mind never fails me, and my senses never go astray. This is the formula I've learned, my dear Narada, he's saying. So these are all very interesting points. And then another thing that Prabhupada points out, Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Here the word prayeshu is used. Prayeshu, nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. Prayaha means about or almost to nil. So here the word used is nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. All the Nityam Bhagavat Abhadreshu, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. Abhadras, the unwanted things, almost, it doesn't say fully. So why is it? Srila Prabhupada explains, the word here used is Prayeshu Abhadreshu. Because you are now come to the stage of Nishtha Bhakti. Nishtha Bhakti, if you have to come, you must get cleansed in your heart, even if it is not 100%, almost. In one place Prabhupada says 75% if you are purified, you will become Nishtha Bhakta. So prayaha nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Then it goes on. Tadarajastamo bhavaha kamalobhadayaschaye chetayetairanaviddam. At that time, when we become Nishtha Bhakta, tadarajastamo bhavaha kamalobhadayaschaye chetayetair anaviddam. The consciousness which is otherwise influenced by rajas and tamo guna, resulting in kamalobha, one's consciousness becomes freed at that stage. And hence, this is a description of the ongoing process of purification. And one becomes Nishtha when one has freed himself from a great amount of impurities in the heart, but not yet full. And then further it goes on. That's why the word Nashta Prayeshva Bhadreshu is used, because further stages are there, and then one becomes more and more self-realized and evam prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. Bhagavat tattva vijnanam jayate is awakened in the heart, and so on. That is why that stage is also described in that way. So these are some of the important things that Prabhupada has brought out here about the steadiness in the yoga practice. Today we have another important thing to read. Thank you very much. Today is Srila Prabhupada Sannyasa Day, on the day on which Srila Prabhupada took sannyas, and we have some reading for recollection of this important event in Prabhupada's life. In 1959 this happened. So we will do some reading of certain events in the life of Srila Prabhupada that led to his taking sannyas. So there is about 6-7 pages of reading. So It's all pastimes, so I think it will be interesting to read. One devotee, a godbrother of Srila Prabhupada, his name Nayanananda Das Babaji Maharaj, recollected this incident where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was there and Srila Prabhupada was there. And at that time Srila Prabhupada was in his Grihastha ashram. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to conduct Navadvip Mandal Parikram and Gaur Mandal, that's Gaur Mandal Parikram and Braj Mandal Parikram. So this was the last year that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was personally there, the Gaur Mandal Parikram was happening. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was personally there and he was addressing the devotees. And at that time, one devotee, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, had sent many disciples. He had made many arrangements through the Gaudiya Math to send his disciples to Western countries to spread Krishna consciousness, Chaitanya's message. So he had spent a lot of money sending them, Gaudiya Math's money. And so one of the devotees who had gone to London, he came back without much success. And this Gaur Mandal Parikram was happening. This devotee had come back from London. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was talking. And in that particular Gaur Mandal Parikram, Abhay Charanaravinda, at that time also he was given the title Bhaktivedanta. He was also present in that situation. And there what happened, this Nayanananda Das Babaji Maharaj, who was present there sitting, participating from the Gaudiya Math, he recalls. The last year that our Gurudev, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, organized and performed Gaur Mandal Parikram, thousands and thousands of pilgrims assembled at our Champahati Mandira. So, thousands of devotees used to participate. There was a whole village of tents in all directions. On the afternoon of the last day, one of our godbrothers had just arrived in Navadvip, having returned from London by a ship. He had gone to preach, but had returned without meeting with full success. In the evening, while Guru Maharaj was giving pravachan, he explained that it was his earnest desire that the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should be spread in the Western countries. He told how it was the vision of Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur that this would happen. And it was the last request of his mother, Srimati Bhagavati Devi, to him before she left this world. Just see this. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mother, that is the wife of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, was also such a great devotee, Bhagavati Devi. Just before she left her body, she requested this of her son Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Please see that Lord Chaitanya's message goes all over the world. What an exalted mother. Usually mothers say, please see that all the money is safe, your sister is safe, married. This is how all generally mothers. Look at the mother here. She is telling before her passing away, please see that Mahaprabhu's mission goes all over the world. So that was the desire of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, and he wanted his son to carry it forward. And also the last request of his mother, Srimati Bhagavati Devi, to him before she left this world. Consequently, he had been willing to take the lifeblood of the Gaudiya Matha in funds to send devotees there to preach. But so far, these attempts had been largely unsuccessful. At this moment in his talk, I noticed, this is Nayanananda Das Babaji Maharaj saying this. At this moment in his talk, I noticed that something very mysterious was happening. Guru Maharaj was looking out at the large crowd of devotees, especially in front, where all the sannyasis and brahmacharis in saffron cloth were seated. Then he turned his head and looked over to his left side, where I was standing. He was looking intently at someone and became silent for a long moment. I happened to look behind me, and I clearly saw that the person with whom he was making eye contact was Abhay Charanaravinda Prabhu. I thought that they were looking at each other in a special way. Then Guru Maharaj again addressed the audience in front of him and said, "But I have a prediction. However long in the future it may be, I predict that one of my disciples will cross the ocean and that devotee will bring back the whole world." I remembered this incident, and Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj truly made it come to pass exactly in this way. And the same devotee, Nayananda Das Babaji Maharaj, further recollects how Abhay Charanaravinda Prabhu was during his Grihastha days. Abhay Prabhu behaved very humbly to everyone. Even though he was senior in many ways to most of the people who came later during those 11 years, he would always pay dandavat to others just because they had taken initiation first. Though he had made that devoted connection with our Gurudev first, he didn't formally take initiation until later on because of his family and his business. I clearly recall how very serious, simple and humble he was. Sometimes when I was in Calcutta, I would go to visit him at Sitakant Banerjee Lane, where he had his home and his chemical business. Sat Prasangananda Brahmachari, who is 93 years old now, and Satisha Prabhu, who is 73, used to accompany me when I visited his house on Sitakant Banerjee Lane. He was very affectionate to us. He always welcomed guests to his home. He opened his house to any Vaishnavas from the Gaudiya Matha, whether they were his god brothers or young brahmacharis who weren't god brothers and hadn't even been initiated. Another occasion, Prabhupada asked, another devotee recollecting this, "You know my story, tea or me?" Prabhupada asked me. "No, Srila Prabhupada," I said, intrigued and eager to hear. Prabhupada asked, "You know my story, tea or me?" Tea, chai. So Prabhupada gave a chuckle. "My wife, she was fond of drinking tea. So one day I told her, either you give up your tea drinking or you give up your husband." "Oh, then I will give up my husband," she said. Of course, she thought I was joking. He went on. But a few days later, I left the house without telling anyone. I borrowed 10 rupees from a friend and bought a train ticket, and I never returned. "Where did you go, Srila Prabhupada?" "Somewhere, anywhere." Prabhupada laughed. He never saw his wife again. Excerpts from reading from Leelamrita. One night, Abhay had a striking dream. The same dream he had several times before during his days as a householder. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati appeared just as Abhay had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyasi coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abhay and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly he called and motioned. He was asking Abhay to take sannyas. "Come," he urged, become a sannyasi. Abhay woke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instruction Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had given him at their first meeting in Calcutta. The same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter, become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the Western world. Sannyasa was for that end. Otherwise, why would his spiritual master have asked him to accept it? Abhay reasoned that his spiritual master was saying, now take sannyas and you will actually be able to accomplish this mission. Formerly, the time was not right. Abhay deliberated cautiously. By accepting sannyas, a Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, renouncing all other engagements. He was doing that already. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had offered sannyas to his leading disciples so that they could continue his mission. They hadn't done it. Preaching in the West had proved perilous, even for the Gaudiya Math's most recognized sannyasis. How could he, a mere householder, presume he could succeed where the others had failed? He was hesitant. The helpless, incapable feeling he had expressed in his Viraha Ashtaka was there. But now his spiritual master was beckoning him over all other considerations, even over natural humility. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach, just as his spiritual master had preached, remained within him. A fierce, though sometimes quietly expressed, determination. The Vedic standard and the example set by the previous acharyas was that if one wanted to lead a preaching movement, sannyas was required. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had taken sannyas to facilitate his missionary work. Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas to further the Sankirtan movement. Of course, Lord Chaitanya was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when his young students had been disrespectful towards him, treating him as an ordinary man, he had taken sannyas. Because a sannyasi is automatically respected. Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas was a calculated tactic. As soon as he began traveling throughout India as a sannyasi, he immediately attracted thousands of followers to the Sankirtana movement. Abhay turned to Keshav Maharaj in Mathura, and Keshav Maharaj, his godbrother, told Abhay to take sannyas immediately. After corresponding with Tirtha Maharaj, Abhay had felt some uncertainty about accepting sannyas. And now that he was being encouraged so strongly, he resisted. But Keshav Maharaj was insistent. Prabhupada recalls, I was sitting alone in Vrindavan, writing. My godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted. Practically my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher. So he forced me through this godbrother. You accept. You accept. So unwillingly I accepted. On October 21st, 1968, on the occasion, Prabhupada was in the US, was in Seattle, on the occasion of disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada's Sannyas Guru, Bhakti Pragna Keshav Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada recalls in ISKCON. Prabhupada was in ISKCON Seattle. It was a very young temple with a very few devotees. Prabhupada used to come to the temple, and they used to have the bhajan and the kirtan and all that. And Prabhupada was staying in an apartment. So one evening he finished the normal regular program, and then he went back to his apartment. And there he had received one telegram. And the telegram said, Bhakti Pragna Keshav Maharaj, the guru, the sannyasi, godbrother who gave him sannyas, had passed away. So Prabhupada, in the night, at about 9 o'clock, he came back to the temple and he called all the devotees again. And all the devotees gathered there. And then he sat and he was very grave and he said, I've just received information that my godbrother, Bhakti Pragna Keshav Maharaj, has passed away. And then he spoke. What he spoke is what I'm reading now. Srila Prabhupada. One has to accept the renounced order from another person who is in renounced order. So I never thought that I shall accept this renounced order of life. In my family life, when I was in the midst of my wife and children, sometimes I was dreaming, my spiritual master, that he is calling me, and I was following him. When my dream was over, I was thinking, I was a little horrified. Oh, Guru Maharaj wants me to become sannyasi. How can I accept sannyas? At that time, I was feeling not very satisfaction that I have to give up my family and have to become a mendicant. At that time, it was a horrible feeling. Sometimes I was thinking, no, I cannot take sannyas. But again I saw the same dream. So in this way, I was fortunate. My Guru Maharaj, Prabhupada begins to cry with a choked voice. My Guru Maharaj pulled me out from this material life. My Guru Maharaj pulled me out from this material life. I have not lost anything. He was so kind upon me. I have gained. I left 3 children. I have now got 300 children. Prabhupada was having 300 disciples. So I am not loser. This is material conception. We think that we shall be loser by accepting Krishna. Nobody is loser. I say from my practical experience. I was thinking that how can I accept this renounced order of life? I cannot accept so much trouble. But I retired from my family life. I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing books. So this God brother, he insisted me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu. This title was given in my family life. It was offered to me by the Vaishnava society. So he insisted me. Not he insisted me, practically my spiritual master insisted me through him that you accept. Because without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he wanted me to become a preacher. So he forced me through this God brother. You accept. So unwillingly I accepted. And then I remembered that he wanted me to go to the Western country. So I am feeling now very much obliged to this God brother that he carried out the wish of my spiritual master and enforced me to accept this sannyas order. Last part. On the day of taking sannyas. Keshav Gaudiya Matha was located in the midst of one of Mathura's downtown bazaars. Its main entrance, an arched doorway, led into a courtyard open to the sky through a metal grating above. Abhay Babu entered the matha dressed in white, but he would soon be leaving dressed in saffron, a Swami. Abhay had been living as a renunciant for 9 years. There was no need for him to observe a ceremony or to proclaim himself as sadhu by changing to saffron dress. But it was the parampara system that a man take Tridhandi sannyas at the end of his life. He was aware of the cheating sannyasis. Even in Vrindavan, he had seen so-called sadhus who did not preach but simply spent their days hunting for chapatis. Some Swamis of Vrindavan even indulged illicitly in what they had supposedly come here to reject, sex life. Such persons were making a mockery of sannyas. And there were the caste Goswamis also, who lived like ordinary householders, running temples as a business to support their families and accepting honor and donations from the public on the false basis of birth. Abhay knew of these abuses of sannyas, but he also knew the real purpose of sannyas. Sannyas was for preaching. On the morning of September 17th, 1959, in the 50 by 25 foot DT room on the second floor of the Keshav Mutt, a group of devotees sat before the deities of Radha Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. The deities were colorfully dressed in royal clothing and silver crowns. Abhay sat on a mat of kusha grass beside 90-year-old Sanatana, also to receive sannyas that day. Sitting opposite the two candidates, Narayan Maharaj, Keshav Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of mantras and offerings of grains and ghee into the fire. Akinchan Krishnadas Babaji, Abhai's another godbrother, known for sweet singing, played mridanga and sang Vaishnava bhajans. Sitting on a raised asana, His Holiness Keshav Maharaj presided. Narayan Maharaj chanted the required mantras and then sat back silently while Keshav Maharaj lectured. Then, to everyone's surprise, Keshav Maharaj asked Abhay to speak. Abhay had not expected this. As he looked around at the gathering of devotees, he understood that the common language was Hindi. Only Keshav Maharaj and a few others spoke English. Yet he knew he must speak in English. After Abhay's speech, each initiate received his sannyas danda, the traditional head-high staff made of 4 bamboo rods bound together and completely enwrapped in saffron cloth. They were given their sannyas garments, 1 piece of saffron cloth for a dhoti, 1 for a top piece, and 2 strips for cowpeen. They also received tulsi neck beads and the sannyas mantra. Keshav Maharaj said that Abhay would now be known as Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, and that Sanatan would be known as Muni Maharaj. After the ceremony, the 2 new sannyasis posed for a photo, standing on either side of their sannyas guru who sat in a chair. That's the picture which is there in the altar today. Keshav Maharaj didn't impose any strictures on Abhay. He simply encouraged him to go on preaching. Yet Abhay knew that to become A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami did not mean merely that he was giving up family, home comforts and business that he had done 5 years ago, changing from white cloth to saffron cloth. From Abhay Babu to Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj had a special significance. It was the mandate he had required, the irrevocable commitment. Now it was only a matter of time before Bhaktivedanta Swami would travel to the west as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had ordained. This was Bhaktivedanta Swami's realization of his new sannyas status. Srila Prabhupada ki. We will stop here. Hare Krishna.